Good morning. As we go to the Chitas of today. Today is Tuesday, third reading in the portion of Yisrael. We're holding on chapter 18, verse number 24. Vayishma Yisrael and Yisrael heard L'kel Chosnei to the voice of his father-in-law. Vayas Kol Hasharam, and he did whatever he said. Vayivcha Moshe Anshe Chayil, and Moshe Rabbeinu gathered men of substance. We call Yisrael from the Jewish nation. He put them leaders upon the heads, upon the people. Sari Alafim, heads of thousands. Sari Meis, heads of hundreds. Sari Chamishim, heads of 50. Sari Asaris, heads of tens. The Shavtar Samachales, and they judged the people at all times. Davakashi via Moshe was a hard issue. They brought it to Moshe Rabbeinu. Sadak called Davakatin to him. Any small issue, they judged it themselves. Rashi says, V'shaftu, and they judged the people. Unlike the word, the verse 22 denotes imperative, denotes present. They did it at the present time. Yaviun, Yamaisiun, they would bring it. Yishu to Haim, they would judge it. Similarly, you find the verse in different places. This way, like Taviru go. Yishlach Moshe es Chesnei, and Moshe Rabbeinu then sent away his father-in-law. And he went on his way to his land. Now she says, why did he leave? The guy, B'nai Mishpachta, he went to convert the rest of his family. And that completes the Chumash for today. We now go to the Tanya of the day. We are holding in the chapter 23 of Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe continues likewise. The external garment of the divine soul of the person. That practices the commandments, meaning its faculty of action, which is internal. It's still part of the soul, but it's in the soul itself. The concept of action, levush ha'maisa, like the three garments, machshava, dibur, maisa. We explained in the beginning of Tanya that the soul has three garments: thought, speech, and action. So, in comparison to thought and speech, the outer garment, the external garment, is the garment of action. So, compared to the faculty of speech and thought, since it functions outside of oneself, action is what you do outside of oneself. So, therefore, that attribute, that concept of the soul is more external than internal. Who mislabish that concept, that garment of the soul of action, clothes itself. It becomes the light. It becomes the light to the garment of the physical action. So ultimately, my garment of action, ultimately, which is an external aspect to my inner concept of thought and speech, becomes the light to the actual action, which becomes the garment to my spiritual action, to my soul power action. Becomes like a body to a soul in relationship. It comes like the body to the soul, the Ratzon Elyon. So therefore, ultimately, when my spiritual action clothes itself in my physical action, now my physical action becomes the body, the garment to my spiritual action. So it becomes united ultimately with my soul. Like a body. So now it becomes like the body to the soul. So now the physical action is like the body to the soul, which is the spiritual part of that action, the purpose of that action, the godliness of that action. The body is a relation to divine will, and it's completely surrendered ultimately to the divine will. So now my body surrenders itself, my physical body, since it becomes the garment to my spiritual side of action. So now my body becomes surrendered to godliness, meaning the soul power of action becomes united with divine will, and at the same time, one's body is united with his soul. And therefore, Gam Egav Guf, also the organs, the physical organs of the body, which performs the mitzvah, becomes a vessel, and his bottle becomes nullified and surrenders itself to the mitzvah. because the organs in which the divine soul faculty of action is clothed during the performance of mitzvah, they too become the virtual vehicle, merkava, chariot to the divine will. So now they become a merkava, they become a chariot for godliness. For example, yad machlekas daka, the hand that hands out charity, or does any other commandment. So now my hand becomes bottled to the mitzvah, becomes an act to perform the mitzvah, the chariot to divine will. So when I take my hand and I give up money to charity, at that moment, my hand becomes nullified to my action of my soul, which is nullified to the soul itself, which is nullified to God. So ultimately, my hand becomes nullified to God's will. So too, when I take my feet and I walk for a mitzvah, so to the mouth. My tongue, when I'm talking words of Torah. And ultimately, even my brain, that is thinking, understanding words of Torah. Having the fear of God, Hashem, in the greatness of God, Baruch Hu, blessed is He. So when these organs are occupied with mitzvahs, they're totally surrendered, like a chariot to the divine will, clothed within these mitzvahs. Note that a physical organ becomes merely a chariot for divine will. It does not become surrendered and is not united with the divine will. The same extent as divine soul faculty of action, whose unity with Alter Rebbe previously compared to the unity of body and soul. The unity of the body and soul surpasses that of the chariot with its rider. Body and soul, although originally two separate, disparate entities, one physical and the other spiritual, becomes one entity when united. No part of the body is devoid of a soul. Conversely, the soul is completely adapts itself to the body, becomes transformed into a corporal life force. The divine soul, faculty of action, being a godly power, can achieve this level of unity with God when it employs in the performance of mitzvahs. So your soul fills your body. It becomes one with your body. It fits like a glove with your body. And therefore, the second I do the mitzvah with my hand, and I give tzedakah, or I put on tefillin, or I help another Jew with this hand, automatically my soul that is working through this hand becomes one entity with the hand. It is part of the hand. It becomes one entity with the hand, which becomes one entity with God. The organs of the body, on the other hand, although they are involved in the fulfillment of the mitzvah, can reach no higher than the level illustrated in the analogy of a chariot. A chariot having no will of its own is indeed completely subservient to its driver, yet not united with them. So therefore, the soul connects through the body. The body itself is a chariot. The body itself is a physical entity that is the chariot that brings about this unity. And this is what the sages meant when they said, that the patriarch were a divine chariot. Because their organs were completely holy and detached from the mundane matters. And all their lives they served as a vehicle for nothing but the divine will. So the reason that the sage designated specifically that the patriarchs as a God's chariot, although every Jew's body becomes a chariot, when performing the mitzvahs, is that the patriarch's submission, the divine will, was unique in its power, its scope, and its consistency. All their organs were totally surrendered to divine will throughout their lives, and that was the greatness of the patriarchs. By us, we connect our soul to God. We bring a concept through our actions, a unity between ourselves and God, because we surrender the physical, but this physical stays physical. The obvious, they became spiritual. Their physicality became spirituality. And so to tzaddikim throughout history. Their physicality became spirituality. So whereas by other Jews, only those organs that perform the mitzvahs are like a chariot. And then only during the act of the mitzvah, it's like a chariot. But the second they stop the mitzvah, the body becomes back to the physical and does only physical and mundane things. A tzaddik, his whole life is spiritual. He transforms his physical body into a spiritual reality. I can imagine such a thing. And that's what the meaning that they became a recover. They became like a chariot 24/7. A chariot doesn't become a chariot and there's a ride on it. A chariot is a chariot, stays a chariot continuously a whole time. So to the obvious became a chariot of God. And the truth is that's a tzaddik. That's what a tzaddik is. A tzaddik becomes a chariot of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He's not that he does spiritual things. He becomes spiritual. We do spiritual things. And at the moment we do a spiritual thing, at that moment, we become a chariot. The second we walk away from the spiritual entity, the second we close the siddur, the second we finish learning, we're back to the mundane parts of life. We become a chariot for something else, and there's another rider who walks in. So we do spiritual things. A tzaddik transforms his physical into a spiritual reality. And everything he does is only spiritual. And that's why he's a chariot consistently. He's not a chariot from time to time. He is a chariot 24/7. In fact, the same organ which today served as a chariot to God might conveniently serve the opposite purpose tomorrow, chas v'shalom, if you're not a tzaddik. And that's the difference. And that's why the Zohar says, what's the greatness of the office? What was the greatness of the patriarchs? And I think that every tzaddik is that he becomes a chariot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He physically becomes a chariot of HaKadosh. So then not only does he surrender the body he has surrendered his whole existence. His whole existence is a godly existence. His whole purpose is a godly existence. There's no other agenda. There's no other purpose by this righteous person. And the greatest example, which the Torah gives openly, is the Avos, is the patriarchs and the matriarchs of the Jewish nation, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. These were people who were totally given over to God. They had no personal agenda, no personal purpose, but the purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why the Zohar says they merited to inherit to their children and their grandchildren, Atsev Kaladedas, they merit to inherit godliness and Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem and MS, all these concepts that we have today, all comes in the schus of these people, the Avos Imois of the Jewish nation. And therefore we mention them constantly, the merit of our fathers. May in the merit of our fathers. Doesn't mean our biological fathers. It means may be a merit of our ancestral fathers, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, who are merkava to God. So too, may the merit of tzaddikim. That's why whenever you mention a tzaddik, you say Zechrein Levracha. May his merit be for a bracha. Because the tzaddik, self-understood, who gave his life away for God and became a merkava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, became a chariot for God, inherited, gave to the world, and especially to Yidden, he gave them something that they will have forever, that will never, ever leave the world. And that is the power of a tzaddik. Since the Eibishter is nitzchias ever, and Torah is nitzchias, this tzaddik becomes nitzchias. This righteous individual comes everlasting. Because he connected, he surrendered himself totally to God and became a merkava, became a chariot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So not only does the spiritual side of himself come, Nitzchias is everlasting, So not only does his soul become everlasting, his physical reality becomes everlasting, and therefore his teaching becomes everlasting. His presence becomes everlasting. I do this as a prelude to the class tonight that the JLI put together. There's a 6-week course starting tonight, which is called Advice for Life. Advice for Life. And this is, they took out advice that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave through his lifetime. And the guidance that the Rebbe gave to the world. And therefore his guidance continues, whether if he's here physically or not. Because the guidance of the Rebbe continues. It becomes this, because that was his life. His life was guidance. His life was guidance of godliness. And therefore, that guidance continues. And I invite you all tonight to Chabad or to, I'm going to do it on Zoom. I will do it on Zoom. So you can come on Zoom, and you're welcome to come and learn and connect to the advice of the Rebbe. What was the Rebbe's advice in different aspects of life? And it's going to be tonight in Mir Hashem at, I believe, at 7:30 p.m. We're going to have this wonderful and beautiful class tonight at 7:30. I invite you all. And today is the 20th day of the month with his chapter 97 to 103. Chapter 97 to 103. If you do those chapters, you do the chitas of the day. Wish you all a great, beautiful, happy, healthy, wonderful day. See you, Mitchell, tomorrow, 8 o'clock. We'll continue the chitas.